welcome everybody. We're going to give some folks some time to join us. It's a beautiful Monday. My name is Chris Ermides. I'm one of the editors and producers at This Old House. I'm here with Jenn, Nawada, our landscape contractor, and Nathan Gilbert, our carpenter. And we're here to talk about decks today. So get your questions ready, design, building, all related to decks, and they're here to answer your questions. But before we get started, Nathan wanted to talk a little bit. He's got some tips for you guys on the process, of the deck building process. So I'm going to turn it over to Nathan to talk about that.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. So a good question any homeowner should ask themselves before they start a deck is, can I build a deck? There's a lot of new kind of zoning laws, a lot of new requirements that towns and cities are requiring before you even dig a footer. And I kind of made a little bit of a list of what a lot of towns are looking for, and some of the things I've gone through recently, doing a little bit more work towards the city of Boston, but they are definitely things around the country that you're going to see with new codes. But the first thing is setbacks, sidelines. You know, if you live in a tight neighborhood, how close can you build to a neighbor's home? And that's going to vary from state to state, town to town. But, you know, it could be 15 feet, could be 20 feet, something you should look at before you start laying out the footprint of your deck. There is a possibility, if you're close, you could get variances. You know, if you're really friendly with the neighbor, they may be able to sign off on it and say it's okay for you to put that structure there. Something new that's, well, it's not too new, but more towns are acquiring engineered drawings, certified plot plans. You should definitely go to the town hall and make contact with them before you invest too much time in designing your deck and budgeting it, because you might need to include this in your cost of your budget, because you might need to hire an engineer who can come out, survey your land, and do a stamped engineered drawing that you can supply to the town or the city that says, these are the existing structures, this is where I want to put the deck. We can get deeper into that a little bit later. You know, if you do have an engineer come, you're going to want to tell him where you want to put the deck, because he might include that in the drawing. That's important. Then once you get past that stuff, you want to look at your budget. You want to look at what kind of materials you want to use to build this deck, how expensive or a more of an economy side you want to do it. And, you know, a lot of people are surprised. I talk about a lot of the composite decking. Just a 12-foot piece can range from $50 to $70 to $90 for a 12-foot piece of this composite decking. So it adds up quickly.
All right, and with respect to the setbacks and the variances that you were talking about, those include fences as well, like in your relation to your property, and
yeah. Before you put any permanent structure up, any dividers or decks, anything important, you want to check your local zoning laws.
And then, what's your where do you come into this process?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Someone's blowers just started going next door. So this is where the whole design process comes into play, and then working backwards. So if you have this master plan, it will cause you to go to the investigations. So like Nathan and I built a deck last year, and we had to do the ratio of permeable surfaces versus non-permeable, and then it had to be a certain square footage. You couldn't make the structure over a certain square footage, but that depended on the square footage of the lot and the existing structure on the lot. So a lot of it goes into it. And so we had a deck coming down to a patio, but those both counted as surfaces. So just, you know, having the whole layout, the plan, and then going to town hall, city hall, and then getting it approved. And because you don't want to start a job and then someone come by and be like, sorry guys, you have to take it down.
So you're saying, so in some places you can only have, you can only cover so much of your lot with a structure?
Exactly. There needs to be a certain amount of permeable surfaces. You know, a lot of people have seen it on the show. We have to, you know, contain, store, and move water differently than ever before because there's so much construction going on. So, for example, the project they're working with Jenn, we couldn't cover 50% of their lot with non-permeable surface, any more than that with non-permeable surfaces. And that's where that plot plan is important, because you can bring that to the town hall and show them exactly what's on your land, what's permeable, what's not, and then from there they can give you the okay or the no on the size of the deck.
And the plot plan, is that something that you draw up, Jen?
No, that has to be done by a surveyor, and then it's been documented down in City Hall. So
got it. Okay.
It's got to be done by a surveyor. And it's also handy, sometimes, a lot of times in the city lots, there's always usually a property line dispute, like, no, I think I own 6 more inches than the other. So sometimes, like, when you mark, I guess this gets into fences and stuff, but like marking exactly where your property line is, and then you take off of that property line to get to the setback of the deck. Every town is different, like Nathan said, like some are 7 feet setbacks, some are 10, and it's usually different on the sides and then the backs. So having a plan is very important.
And Nathan, just getting back to the your talk about the engineered drawings, is that something that, like, you need to have an architect do that? Is it something that you can just get a structural engineer to draw, or is it something that you could do yourself and provide all of the relevant, like, spans and all that sort of thing?
Most towns and cities will accept a hand-drawn drawing of your deck, but it needs to be to scale. So if you don't have that ability to do a scale drawing, then I would hire a professional. We've come across both, since I've been doing a lot of decks recently, we've come across all examples where some towns, they go there and it's a simple sketch with my footings, my framing, what I'm going to use for decking, how high the railing is going to be so you meet code. They just want to make sure that you're ticking off everything. Other towns, they might want to see a little bit more about the fasteners or the hangers. So if you can't do a scale drawing, I would definitely consult a professional.
Got it. Okay. And Jen, you guys, you alluded to the fact that you guys worked on a project together. Do you guys work often together outside of the show's projects?
Yeah, and it really works well. It works well knowing the contractor. I have to know the contractors I work with. And Nathan and I worked really, really well on this last project because the deck is up here coming out of the house onto a patio. So we had to have a constant conversation. He poured his footings, asked what the height of our patio was going to be, and then he built the deck. And then before he put the stairs in, we determined final grade of patio so we could nail it, land it right where the foot would be at the end.
Yeah, we want to have a comfortable rise and run coming off of, an example is a bluestone patio, and we were able to get it right on the mark. There's also a little bit of a scribe, too, because it was pitched a little bit for water drainage, so I was able to scribe my first riser right through the stonework.
Got it. And is that the Newton project that you guys are?
That was the Newton project, yeah.
We got some photos of that to show folks. And what was the planning to completion time frame of that project? Do you guys talk about that?
Well, weather always comes into play, especially in the springtime here. So I think in total, maybe you took 3 weeks, Nathan. But then simultaneously, we were doing the base of the patio, and
there's a lot that goes in behind the scenes. To go to the town hall to drop the permit off, there could be 2 to 4 weeks before they approve it. You might get it back, and there's a couple more things they want you to do before they'll sign off on it. Then you got to get your material dropped off, and it always rains the day after, so you can't get right to work. And then all of a sudden you're getting into it. You dig your footers, you get those in. And then you have to let those cure before you can start building off of that. So there's these set days that take time, and then you have to play the weather as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but then you find unforeseen things under the ground.
Yeah.
Like the oil tank that we found underground at this same project, and so that put a hold on it, because if you find a tank filled with even just some oil, like we had to call the fire department, we had to get a permit to pull it out, and sometimes they make you put test zones. The EPA, it makes you have like soil test zones to see if it leached out into the soil, and then they had to have several sign-offs, and then the project can continue. So you never know what you're going to find underground too that changes.
How did you guys discover that? Like, at what stage in the process was that? Was that when you were pouring footings for the deck?
It was after the footings, when we were digging for the base of the patio.
Oh, wow.
The excavator's like, and we were like, oh my gosh, what's that? And then the discovery began. Because it wasn't that big, but it had oil in it. And I think they determined, like, back in the day, it was just buried, and someone worked on a car in their garage and drained it to this reservoir underground. So, yep.
And it didn't leach, I take it.
No, thank goodness, because then that could have held up the entire project. So, but yeah, working hand in hand is so important. Each for the way.
Jenn's been a great conduit between the homeowners and myself, because coming into this job, we didn't have an engineered drawing or an architectural drawing of the deck. We kind of just met, and she had already talked to the homeowners and kind of envisioned what they were, looking for. She was able to translate that to me, and by the time I figured out the decking, the screening, skirting detail, and what they wanted for the railings, the rest is really up to me as far as the framing and the finish.
Right, but having one contact point, one point person because one job requires several contractors. You have carpentry, you have masonry, you have lighting, electricity, you have irrigation. So I draw the design, and then I manage all the contractors to make sure everyone talks at the right time when appropriate.
So you're really creating an outdoor living environment that's multifaceted, that has a lot of elements to it, and you're the one in charge of facilitating all that.
Correct.
Cool.
It's fun. Make sure people show up when they need to show up. Because that's probably one of the hardest parts of a job, I think, is coordinating people to show up because two contractors have to be there at the same time to figure out a certain solution. So
and even if you have the masons there, cutting bluestone and laying it right where I'm trying to frame around this deck, it's hard for us to do the dance. We always play well with others, but there's some days I just can't be there with all my tools spread out cutting material if they're going to be working within maybe 10 feet.
Right. No, that makes
sense. So I try to give them the heads up, like this is happening tomorrow.
Yep.
Anything else you want to go do,
Bring extra protection.
Yeah.
Those cut-off saws all day long.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But a lot goes into a project, I guess, is what we're trying to say. And that's why you hire the professionals, because it may seem more expensive in the front, but if you try to GC, people can GC it themselves if you know how the process goes. But I think people end up saving a lot of money in the long run because you're not doing it backwards. You have a sequence of steps you have to follow.
And getting back to those to the planning, Nathan, that you talked about earlier, and maybe you both could speak to this. What do you find are you seeing from your clients, and when they start thinking about planning this new addition, essentially this new addition to their house, a deck and outdoor space?
Yeah, you're really expanding it out the back door and creating this new living environment. Right about now, right around springtime, a lot of people get outside, they're itchy, and all of a sudden they realize they want a little bit more entertaining space, whether it's a deck, a patio. And unfortunately, it's a little late now to get it for this season because of the planning that goes into it. It could be 3 or 4 months before everything gets signed off and approved, and checks are deposited for materials before you can start digging foundation footer holes. But if a homeowner knows they want to do something, there's no better time than to reach out to a contractor, because maybe you can do it for next spring.
Right. Like this project that we worked on, they contacted me at the end of the year, like in beginning of December, and they said, let's circle back in January. And then I had those frozen months to do all the planning and estimating and design meetings back and forth, because it usually takes a handful of meetings to get exactly what you want, right? From plants to all the details that are involved. So, because once you have a proposal, like when I write a proposal, I spell out each section, like patio costs this, lighting costs this, carpentry costs this, and then they know exactly. It's like a menu list, and if they need to do a phase 1 or phase 2, then they pick what they want. But then if they pick the one that should go first, I direct them, like, you have to do the deck first before you come out. You can't do the patio first, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that whole sequence thing.
And before we're going to jump into some questions in a minute, but before that, what are you finding in terms of clients' expectations about budgeting? Like, are they do they have a good handle on how, how much a deck can actually cost and that whole process, or do you have to do a lot of educating your clients about that?
I personally have to do a lot of A lot of people say, I don't know, we have no idea what landscape costs, just do it. And then you end up designing $100,000 project and they want to spend 50. So a lot of people are hesitant about giving a budget up front because they don't want you to charge more, and like it's just, I don't know. I would never do that, but like it's you have to have realistic expectations. I tell them.
Yeah. With each client, it's different dance. Like Jen's saying, you kind of have to feel them out. They feel you out a little bit. And what kind of deck do you want? What kind of materials have you seen that you like? And from there, I can say, okay, I never really like to give a ballpark number, but I know I can tell them it's going to be about this in this range. If you do more composite, it's going to go up. And they're like, oh, that's a little bit more. Maybe we'll scale it back and do a little bit more pressure treated than composite, and you'll save quite a bit there.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Should we jump into some questions?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's see. Blue Water on YouTube is asking, do I need to sand my deck to get rid of an existing coating, stain, and seal before I stain and seal it new? Or is it just a matter of pressure washing and applying some deck cleaner sufficient?
I would always recommend sanding, then pressure washing, because repetitive pressure washing, you're taking all that soft pulp out of the wood, and then you're going to make it very coarse and not as comfortable to walk around on. It'll age faster. I think Mauro did a great segment where he set the nails and sanded it, and that's definitely the application I would go with. And you do want to sand it to get out those old finishes.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that helps, Blue Water. No, it's probably a little more work, but in the end result, as Nathan said, it'll be more enjoyable to walk on. You definitely want to have a smoother surface when you're walking on your deck.
I've seen some decks that people have pressure washed yearly. Maybe it's in a kind of a damp spot and it gets a lot of mold or moisture on it, and they pressure wash it, and it almost looks like Carpenter ants got to it. They've taken out so much pulp. It's very cool. Yeah.
I've done that. My own patio. I was like, what's happening? And then I stopped myself. And then I had to sand that part down because it's so satisfying taking the pressure washer, just taking it across, and then I'm like, oh, I just stripped the wood. That's really bad.
Were you able to sand it down enough that it was fine?
Yes. It took a while. Had to get Mr. Miyagi going.
All right. Tony on Facebook is saying, good morning from Michigan. Good morning, Tony. What do you recommend for a cedar deck with respect to snow? Every year I end up having to reseal my deck due to the peeling. I've tried oil and water-based products, but both fail consistently.
That's tough because I was going to recommend just an oil-based product. Whenever you can go with oil, I would go with that over a water-based.
Yep.
Yeah, Mauro recommends the Panafin. It's you seal it. It's an oil, soaks in. He says that's his number one.
Yeah, and probably too. So he said it's cedar.
Okay.
Getting a lot more. It's getting a lot more exposure to rain than other parts. Be possible too. So, Nathan, talk for a minute about. Do you use a lot of cedar when you're building decks, or do you?
I use a lot of fir. A lot of straight grain fir, people like that for decking and for, say, beadboard ceilings. I've done fir and stained it, different colors the customer wants. I haven't done as much cedar around here.
And you do a lot of composite decking too, right?
A lot of people are asking for it. Actually, kind of an important thing when I meet a customer, maintenance is a big topic. How active are they with the ability to sand, stain. And people like the look of mahoganies and teaks and exotic woods, but if you don't take care of it and keep it oiled, then it's going to gray out and it's not going to have that great dark color to it. So sometimes I told people, with the teak and the mahoganies, you're going to have to yearly take care of it. And they're like, oh well, what's the better option? Well, composite over the long run is great because you can pressure wash it, very little maintenance to it. But those composite companies, they know what their product is worth. It's priced very comparable to some of the exotic woods.
And Jen, are you finding that are you involved in that level of the process, the decision?
A lot of my clients, we like to use Ipe, and that's just a very 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 hard wood, and it takes a lot longer to work with because it's so hard. But between that and mahogany is usually what I recommend if we're doing natural wood. But like Nathan said, a lot of people are moving to composite because of the ease of caretaking. Yeah.
I think last year I did about 4 or 5 decks where I resurfaced or redecked and went from a wood to a composite material.
And I have to say, I'm one of those guilty ones as well.
One client right there.
Deck, and I was like, Nathan, I've got to do it. And so he just came. I mean, everything was in place, just ripped up and then put down composite. I mean, I have a 110-pound dog and kids and stuff, always scraping it and trying to keep the upkeep of that. I felt guilty. I had honestly felt guilty. Your dad actually made me feel guilty. But I was just like, I have to do it for a function.
No, but that's a great point, though. It's not just the maintenance of it, but it's also how resilient it is. Some of these composite materials, they can stand up to the pets and the kids and the traffic.
Right. When you have a 100-pound dog jumping up and just his claw marks are on the floor, I'm like, no! And I have no scratches right now.
Composites can handle all that?
Yep.
Yeah, most can.
Are there any, what are some of the drawbacks of composites where maybe the wood products like Ipe or mahogany might shine better?
There's quite a bit of expansion and contraction with a lot of these because of the core of them. A lot of it is a plastic composite. It's, made of a bunch of different things that they've melted and punched out. And, fastening, I like to use a Cortex fastener on most of my decks with a plug system. I think it looks great.
So that's a base screw that, creates its own little divot.
Creates its own pocket, and then it comes with a package of color match bungs, which I bung it, and you can make the grain line up. That's a necessity for stairs because you're not going to be able to get that outside fastening with a hidden fastener. Say you have the grooved decking, you're going to have that leading edge of that tread, and you don't want to see that groove. So you're going to use that on your stairs. Across the field, depending on how large the deck is, I usually still just go with Cortex because I have so many of them, and I've done enough decks that I have extra leftover plugs and Cortex screws, so I can kind of go through them.
So let's talk for a second about that detail, that tread detail that you're talking about. So if you're going with a composite decking that has grooves on the side, presumably for it's set up already for hidden fasteners that would clip there. But you want
like a biscuit style or a clip style. It's set up for those.
But you want to use it as a nosing essentially as the first piece of a tread, the leading piece of a tread. What do? You rip that groove off and then profile it?
You can't rip it off because most of these have the surface is only the color of the decking piece. It's just like a wrap around it, and then the core is darker. So if you rip that, you would see the core of it. So what you need to do is order square edge decking as well. So do your field with your grooves, and then order a few sticks to do your treads of the square edge.
Got it. Good.
Yeah.
It's good info.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Charles on YouTube. Sorry, Charles on YouTube is saying thank you for doing this. Thanks for joining us, Charles. I'm looking to put a 6-foot wraparound porch and roof on a balloon frame house. How do I attach the ledgers to the house? So that's an interesting question, right? Because usually there's certain codes, right, for how to attach the ledger to a house, and a lot of times you can tap into the rim joist or the foundation or whatever. But on a balloon frame house where there's no rim joist, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, it sounds like he's going to have to open it up and start doing some structural fill, whether he's letting in some bracing or doing blocking, creating his own rim joists. Mm-hmm. He might even want to sandwich something on the backside of those studs, so maybe he's creating a package and sucking it all together. That would be pretty structural. might want to consult a carpenter or an engineer to take a look.
Yeah.
Depending on how high it is and what kind of load's going to be on the
Right.
deck.
Yeah. Sure. Because that's a lot of the deck failures happen at that point, right? And especially higher up.
Yeah, you're gonna want to do a lot of waterproofing there anyway. So there's no reason you couldn't open it up and open the sheathing up and really make it solid, and then redo all of your waterproofing.
Yeah. Okay. Charles, hopefully that helps. Thanks for writing in and joining us. Andrew on YouTube is saying, do paver patios tend to be more cost effective than similar size decks? That's an interesting question. I've heard that myself, as I have a similar potential project in my near future.
I mean, square footed, I mean, how would you do that? I guess you'd have to really calculate space to space, and I don't know.
Yeah, that would be a tough one to it's hard to compare that because there's so many options on a deck. You know, is his idea of a finished deck more of a pressure treated decking with railings and balusters, or is it more composite decking with composite rail systems, maybe even cable rail is the look he's going for? There you could be at $20,000-$30,000 on the size of the deck. So obviously a paver would be more efficient. If it was a step down, you could just do a nice set of stairs onto the pavers. Budget's the biggest factor with all that.
Sometimes people just want to walk like out one step to deck and then just one step down, then that don't need railings and everything. So I think that's enough. I wonder if that's what he's talking about, because people go wood to be elevated, just 7 inches, 14 inches. It's I still think decks are probably more expensive.
Yeah, I would say so.
But it depends on what brand of paver. Sorry, Chris. It depends on what brand. It all depends on your materials. You can get the deluxe, you get medium, you get low end. So
and we get
for patios as well.
Sorry.
Is that same? Do you have those same price levels for different materials and patios as well?
I mean, concrete pavers the price is getting up there. There's so many different decorative pavers that they mimic bluestone, but they're actually concrete. But you're getting up there with the comparable price of what the real stone costs. So, and I personally always go for real stone because I love that material. But in some applications, concrete pavers are just as fine. But price-wise, they're starting to match.
Yep. Okay. Andrew, hopefully that helps. Thanks for joining us and for writing in. We're going to take a couple more questions. I want to give a shout out to Stephen, who's watching from Manchester, UK.
Yeah, Stephen.
Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
And just
we got Shadow on YouTube is saying, I need to replace my deck and the door from the house. Should I replace the deck first or the door? What do you guys got any thoughts on that? Nathan, you got any thoughts on that?
I do both at the same time. I mean, I would, if you have things opened up, I would replace the door during the framing stage of the deck, because I would get the elevation set on the deck and I would get my decking on, and then I would take the door out, put the new door in, weatherproof it back in, and then put the new, if there's a step up, put the new toe kick in at that point. If you could do either first, or you get the same result.
I could see too where there's a scenario where you'd want to integrate potentially some of the flashing of the ledger, in flashing of the sill of the, like if it's a one step down, there might be a scenario, I think you were alluding to it, where you're you want to over flash.
Come over down and then flash over your ledger board.
Yeah. So ideally, like you said, they'd be done sort of at the same time, but so they integrate the flashing on there. Yeah, that makes sense.
To use the deck I did in Newton as a good example, who had ever done the siding before didn't do a great job with the toe kick, so they wanted to replace that. So when I had some of the siding off, when I was putting my ledger on and I brought it back down to a new J channel, I did the toe kick as well at that point.
I think any two places that are touching or communicating, they have to have some kind of transition point.
Yeah, good point. So Shadow, hopefully that helps. Last question, Andrew on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. Andrew's asking, is it practical to add additional support to an existing raised deck 6 feet or so to accommodate something like a hot tub, or should the deck just be rebuilt?
You can resupport an existing deck. I've done it before, because back the code was different even 10, 15 years ago, and what they needed to frame with. It might be a 2x6 material that they use for joists, and now it should be a 2x8, or if they were going to put a hot tub up there, maybe up to a 2x10 to support that load. If he has the space to work, I would definitely recommend putting some solid footers down there, and then using probably a 6x6 post up to a beam to support the middle of that deck.
Okay.
If it's something like 2x4 joists and a rim joist, yeah, I would definitely take it down and replace it. But if it's a newer deck and they don't need to blow it apart, resupporting where they can, and just try and tie it back into the house.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And with a something as heavy as a hot tub on it, I mean, that sounds. Would an structural engineer, be someone to consult on that?
I definitely would. There's quite a bit of load there.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Andrew. Hopefully that helps.
Maybe they're thinking.
Another thing to think about too is a lot of people like to cantilever their decks over. So maybe there's their post and their beam, and if he wants to put that hot tub out here, past that center support, that's a lot of weight pulling down out here. So he'd want to support out at the end if he was going to add that load.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time. We're getting up on the 30-minute mark, and I know both of these contractors have a lot of work to do. So
yeah.
Thank you both for joining us, and thank you all for joining us, for watching, and for sending in your questions. We'll be back on Wednesday here with Jenn and Mark to talk about patios specifically. So join us then, and bring your questions. And until,
we can get more details about materials there.
Cool. All right.
Good to see you, Chris.
Good to see you guys. Thanks so much.
Take care.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.